All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Sayan Gomel. I'm the Managing Director of Silicon Valley Bank. We're very proud and glad to. We have an amazing panel, but before we start, I'm going to invite our chairperson of Silicon Valley, the TÜSİAD Silicon Valley Network, Ayşegül Deniz, to say a few words.
Welcome everybody. So this is going to be the last event of the year for us. We've done a couple of events and the turnout so far has been amazing. We actually do look for feedback about all these events that we're organizing to make sure that you can connect to each other, support, and then we're busy trying to figure out a way to connect ourselves back to Turkey so we can give back. But I particularly want to thank Sayan and Silicon Valley Bank, who's been enabling us to use this fabulous venue and also organizing all these. And apologies, my back. And thanks to our wonderful panelists. Look forward to the very exciting discussion tonight. So interact with us. Go on our LinkedIn page. Just don't be a stranger, and let's keep talking. So special thanks again to Sayan, Sena, Burahan, Tutkun, and all the other team that made it happen. Great job. Thank you.
All right. Before we start, let's give a round of applause for our guests. Thanks again for being here tonight. Why don't we just start with introductions? Eren, if you could tell us a little bit about your background, your past, and what your current company.
Of course. My name is Eren Bali. I moved here 10 years ago and started a company called Udemy, which became one of probably the largest online education platform in the world. During the first 6 years, we raised $107 million of funding, and we have right now around 40 million students, learning anything from photography to marketing to design from roughly 100,000 instructors. The company is in a pretty mature state. There's around 600 employees right now. And 2 years ago, I started another company called Carbon Health in the healthcare space this time. So we are trying to essentially use the best of technology to make world-class healthcare accessible to everyone. So some of you guys might be living here, so the healthcare access here is honestly even worse than Turkey for people who don't have the means. And honestly, we thought like this was not our goal. Like this could be changed. So we built a kind of small team of engineers, physicians, designers, people in operations to kind of reimagine what the healthcare experience would look like if you want to provide a 10 times better consumer experience with a lower cost, without increasing the cost at all. So right now we have around 15 clinics as of today. We'll be opening 40 more clinics. Raised $49 million so far. But this is going to be it's an operationally intensive company, so we'll probably raise even more money and growing very aggressively in the upcoming years.
Excellent. Well, congratulations on your recent fundraise. Yeah. And thanks again for joining. How about you, Nuno?
I'm an entrepreneur in venture capital, which is actually relatively silly. One of the least scalable businesses on earth, very binary. You either raise money or you don't. If you don't raise money, there's no right to live, etc. So I've been in tech for 23 years. Was not a 10x computer engineer, so became an engineering manager and product manager. Probably should have stayed a product manager all my life. Still love product. Ended up becoming an operator. Spent 6 years in Asia, in Beijing with McKinsey & Company, and then ended up spending some time here in the Bay Area, actually because of advisory boards. Maybe I'll come back to that later. In 2007, and moved here in early 2012 to do my own venture firm, Strive Capital. I think our claim to fame is we're the first analytics-driven early-stage VC firm in the Bay Area before Signal Fire and a few others came to light. We invest in companies like App Annie, KeepSafe, Enish, Gusto, Rubrik, Verta Health, OmConnect, and a few others. Because I have plenty of time on my hands, I also do a little bit of a stint at Christian Robotics, which is a Series A Sandal Road firm focused on physical tech and hard tech. But my main focus is on Strive. And at this panel today, one of the things that I would talk about is actually I've done all the things we're going to talk about. So I've been an investor, and I've been on boards as an investor. I've been an independent board member. I've been an advisor, and I've been a consultant. And these things have very thin lines between them. And the final thing, and probably the most important thing, is I wished I had invested in Carbon Health now twice. And will probably never forgive me for this, and will be on my anti-list going forward.
Great.
True story.
Thank you. How about you, Fad?
Thanks everyone for coming here to listen to us. So I started my career in finance actually as a fund manager, and I ran liquid alternatives. Started in New York and then ended up moving to Switzerland. Did that for 10 years and kind of ended up here as the result of wanting to solve a personal problem that I perceived, where during the course of my work, I would need to sign into multiple different systems with a high level of security because we were managing billions of dollars in liquid markets and being able to wire large sums of money out, etc. And in doing that, I basically used to travel around with a huge keychain with about 8 different security key fobs for different prime brokers, for different accounts that we had, etc. And I just felt that it could be done better with mobile phones. That was right around when mobile phones, apps, etc. had started to proliferate and replace kind of standalone single feature products. So I talked a little with my brother, who basically in Turkey was running a consulting firm, building custom software for banks in Turkey, for entities across Europe, and kind of selling in Europe, not to the US, and custom, not very scalable products. When talking to him, I kind of said, can we design something like this that would have federated identity? It would be all-in-one with single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, and kind of meet future needs as the power available at the hand of hackers would increase. And he essentially said, yes, it's possible, but we need a fair bit of money, and I can't do both. So, I'd have to shut down the consulting business. And over the course of about a year of talking about it, we decided to do it. So it's kind of why I'm here.
Great. Congratulations on that decision. And Balan.
Merhaba. Hi, thanks for having me, guys. My name is Balan Rhymes. I was one of the founding team members of Anchor Free. Our product was Hotspot Shield, very well known in Turkey as yasaklı sitelere girer. Yes. Thank you. So we sold our company last year to a private equity group. When we started the company, they said nobody would use this product. We scaled to 500 million installs. They said nobody's gonna, you won't be able to raise any money. We raised $63 million, and then they said, oh, you won't be able to sell this because the majority of your users are in the Middle East. Well, we sold it for $390 million last year. The advisory board for us was extremely crucial because from seed to exit, we pivoted 3 times. And all these pivots came from the knowledge and the experience and the diversity we had on the advisory board. So it was very crucial to our success because we were at the time fairly young entrepreneurs, really didn't know what we were doing. So we needed that guidance, and we got that guidance. And then I took a little bit of time off, and then having mission-driven, similar to you guys, another space that is not disrupted is education. So we are now building a company that is helping students move away from factory-style assembly line type of learning and learning based on their individuality and uniqueness, and giving them a personalized and a highly focused path so they can meet the competence levels but also learn at the pace and the subjects that they would like. We're not fundraising right now. We wanted to fundraise, and then we figured out a lot of the investors we talked with were extremely draconian. We said, you know what, we don't need it, we're just gonna do it, bootstrap it. We have the team knows me, so We are building an advisory board. We have an excellent advisory board, so we can talk about that later.
Great, what a nice segue.
Yeah,
Topic
thank you.
tonight. So, working in Silicon Valley Bank and being active in the Turkish community, this is probably the most asked topic over the last couple of years. Everybody asked me specific questions on how to compensate advisory boards, where to find them, where to use them, and if it's not working out, how do we part ways? So hopefully tonight we're going to answer all those questions. So I'm very excited. So Eren, why don't we start with you? Tell us more about your current advisory board. What are the areas you leverage them? What type of questions you ask them, and when they become handy?
Sure. Yeah, I think I did a slightly different approach to kind of getting advisors than most of the people. So when we first started Udemy, so I think both at Udemy and Carbon we had this kind of similar setup. So I would usually have like 1 or 2, maybe 3 just more generalist advisors or just friendly faces that I can actually talk to at any time. So when things are going good or bad, so some people where I can get like kind of unfiltered and genuine advice. So they also kind of act also as a kind of executive coach sometimes. So if you wanna, I don't know, partner with some co-founder, like do like other stuff, like have you raised a round but you're not sure, and like all these kind of complex times, like you want a couple people who are good like sounding boards. They don't have to be like the most famous, like well-known people. If anything, honestly, ideally they are people who can kind of answer your calls like fast.
But definitely people you trust.
Yeah, exactly. This is like a small. I always have a small number of advisors who are just like kind of unconditional trust.
Yeah.
And then aside from that, I mostly get like extremely specific kind of domain level experts to help me with different things.
Mm-hmm.
So I have people I usually talk to if I'm talking about big partnerships or like a kind of enterprise sale, things like that. So I have people who are really strong at kind of growth marketing, user acquisition side of things, marketing, storytelling. Even in the product side, there are people I talk to. That's that actually product is probably the place I usually am advising most other people. Yeah, so even the fundraising. So it's usually there's just a couple generalist sounding boards plus just whatever skill set I need. So I kind of talk to people. If the discussions become repeated, then I start offering them shares. And I guess I think the mistake I see a lot of people are doing it in general, especially in Silicon Valley, is just like trying to kind of shoot for names when they're looking for advisors. I have had famous advisors; they're almost completely useless.
Never available.
Yes, sorry, like never available, like for good reasons, right? So, I mean, if you are gonna get this famous person's advisor, like if they can join your board, like that does work because they have to come at this once a quarter or once every 6 weeks, as I do. And another thing I want to mention is, like, aside from the advisory board, so I'm a very pro-governance founder. So even when we were seed founders, we did not have to have a board, but I had 3 people in the board even when we first started. So right now I have 8 people coming joining our board meetings every 6 weeks. We do like set a quarter with every 6 weeks. Everybody is required to come in person. I don't accept dial-ins. And like there's really only one person I like had to just formally put on the board, but there's 7 more people. Some of them are kind of observers. Most of my observers are coming with another board member. But so I like actually kind of having a lot of accountability to the board because they become by far the most effective advisors.
Excellent. And Nuno, how active are you when you're helping your portfolio companies in picking it?
Very active, and actually I am an advisory board member still to companies, and I have actually that's how I got to venture capital. It was an advisory board thing that mutated into actually becoming a venture capitalist, which is really interesting. So the way I think about it, and I normally advise my companies to actually have advisory boards or to have at least a group of advisors or senior advisors that they count on, is normally they would fit into one of 3 things. Either you get them for their expertise. They have a very specific expertise either around product or growth hacking or a specific industry that you're trying to tackle and go into. And that's one angle. The 2 pieces, Rolodex. In Rolodex, you really need to understand if the Rolodex is real or not. I think in particular in Silicon Valley, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of people that know that person's my best friend, they've met them once, right? I mean, unless they're really good that first meeting, it's, unlikely they're best friends. So I think sometimes there's what I call breadth of networking and depth of networking. For example, I work with someone currently at Christian Robotics, and he's an incredible broad networker. He's probably the best guy I've met. So normally we do a 1-2. I'm a little bit better at deeper networking. So when we go to an event, you'll meet everyone, and then he'll tell me the 5 people I need to meet. So that's how we play it together. But you know, understanding Rolodex is understanding depth of connection, understanding what people can actually ask from each other is pretty important. But that's one second reason that you'd have an advisory board member. And then the third one is really the mentorship and coaching, etc. angle that Aaron was referring to earlier. For me, the common mistakes I've seen, and by the way, I actually did a presentation on this by, as shortly as it may seem, on boards, advisory boards, and consultants, and sort of showing the different spectrum of options in it and how much you give away of your company or not. I think it's still on my LinkedIn profile, so you guys should check it out if you're interested at all. But one thing I've learned through the years is people, one is they want the name, right? 2 is normally they want fundraising, you know, let's help me fundraise. And so I think alignment of interest is really important. For example, I hate helping entrepreneurs fundraise unless I must do as an investor, which I must, right? I prefer being used as the expert guy on something, and maybe it's product, maybe it's something around data analytics. So having that discussion up front is very important and very essential, and it actually sometimes does not happen. You never had that sit-down moment where the potential advisor is saying, this is what we need from you. Is this really what you want to do with us? Or is there something else you're more excited about doing with us? And that, I think, is the first thing. The second thing is the alignment of incentives, and we'll talk about exactly what are the conditions of having an advisory boards. So we'll come back to that later. And the third thing is really, you know, is this person committed to you as an individual? Is this person committed to the company? Do they understand? Is there something around it? And the final thing is governance. I've actually been on advisory boards and then joined boards as an independent board member. There was actually one funny one where the advisory board was me, so it wasn't really a board, and the board was joining the advisory board calls and meetings with me, and at some point, someone on the board, very intelligent person, said, why don't we just ask this guy to join the board as an independent, because we have an independent board seat that is vacant, right? And sometimes that works, but that changes the dynamics of the game very significantly, right? I always say an advisor on the board has a little bit more teeth, right? Because at some point I have a vote, and that matters. And so I think at the end of the day, you need to think through all these dimensions of incentives, alignment of objectives, and at the end also on governance, whether the person should be an advisor, board member, something else altogether.
Great. And how about you, Fatih?
Okay. As Iran said, I think it's important to understand why you want the advisor on board. In our case, both cases where with our board members, we've used them to basically validate our product where we were doing something that hadn't really been done before. We were doing it in a different way, doing kind of a Swiss Army knife of an identity product instead of single feature products. And so the first member of our advisory board that we reached out to was kind of a living legend in the space, and we wanted to get his opinion on it and to see if he would validate our vision, because we thought he kind of was the most visionary person in cybersecurity, and so that's why we approached him, and then the second person that we brought on board was really more when we were at a later stage where we wanted someone to be able to help open doors that we didn't necessarily have access to through their Rolodex.
And was that also in cybersecurity, or?
Yes, I mean our company is within a niche of cybersecurity, so both of them have been in that space. Additional members we may bring on board may not necessarily have been in that space, but we're looking at someone on the sales and growth marketing side to potentially bring on board, for example. They don't have to be in that space.
Interesting. So you definitely value the industry experience as a criteria when you're picking your advisors.
I think specific to our industry, that's absolutely critical because it's kind of a very cliquish space. CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers all kind of know each other. They have pretty regular quarterly kind of meetings where people share the kind of threats they've seen, et cetera. So it's a very tight-knit community, and I think in that regard it makes sense. That may not have to be the case in every industry.
Got it. And thank you.
Thanks.
How about you, Balman?
So when we're picking our advisory board, we look at really two things: how they relate to us as founders, and how they relate to our mission. I mean, because we're so mission-driven, both at Anchor Free and also now ADAI, it's important to be on a similar frequency with your advisory board. So we definitely look at that, how they relate to us, but also the mission. I think it's key. The second thing we look at it is it needs to be a win-win situation in order to get benefit from these guys, because they're really not there for money. They've made their money, they've made their wealth for maybe upcoming couple of generations. So we really need to figure out what really motivates these people to work with us. I think that is very key. We look at that, and then how do you structure that? I think that's a separate question. We can discuss that. But we've been, in terms of diversity, both for AD, we're still building the ecosystem, but for Anchor Free, we had a very diverse advisory board. We had security, cyber security, because it was a VPN space. We had, because of the positioning of the product, we had the ex-head of Ogilvy at our advisory board in terms of messaging and marketing. And then we also had, I mean, you guys know, I'm not going to be shy about it, because we were also going head-to-head with governments. They were trying to block us all the time. We had some ex-diplomats and ambassadors on our board who would help us navigate that very thin and delicate space between how we work with the operators of these governments and how we also run a healthy business. So it was definitely different.
Great, fascinating. So let's talk about nuts and bolts a little bit. So you found an advisor that you like. What is the typical term that you offer? How long do they stay?
So usually it's just the first couple conversations are always free, and most of the meeting you get is like just
With
like,
me, it's only one.
yeah, so like once or twice. So a lot of the people ask, from a lot of people, you just really need two conversations. So the third conversation, when it's like it has to be an advisor almost. So I sometimes honestly, there are people who I met like 10 times, still haven't offered me anything. So I think in Silicon Valley, like people are surprisingly helpful, especially if you don't go for the names. Like I think this is kind of the interesting thing most people don't realize. Like for example, a lot of people ask me, want to chat with me to learn about how we became successful. Reality is, if you email any of the first 30, 40 employees of Udemy, like they will tell the same story.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm kind of so used to speaking at conference and talking about it. So my answers have become a lot more bullshit lately. So because when you talk in the conference, you end up like creating a story, and you eventually you forget the reality. So you just ask the first 20, 30 people at Udemy, you will get a much more realistic answer. So I think that really, like, more, as I said, like, I don't offer anything, like, and I get 80% of the video probably without offering any shares or anything. It's just like really informal chat with them. So, but if you say a kind of person that you want to continuously learn from, which might be one of the reasons why, either they are the sounding board and they're like becoming an executive coach. So, like, if you are pre-funded, like a pre-funding, so up to 1% is normal. So I remember our first advisor, before we raised any money at Udemy, so I talked to him, I said like, okay, he was a kind of executive at Facebook and Microsoft before that, so he accepted to become an advisor. I said, okay, first question I want to ask, like, how much should I give you? It was very quick, and he said, the ultimate highest is 1%, so that you should give, but probably 0.3, 0.4, like those are normal for like a pre-funded company. So once you are like funded and maybe Series A, B, a board member typically gets around 1%. And typically the type of board member you would want always gets 1% until you're public, right? So like, because when you're large, you want more kind of branding. board members. So the advisors, I guess like from 10% to 50% of that is kind of common. So,
And what's the duration?
so yeah, so the standard deal is like a 2-year or 3-year monthly vesting, no cliff kind of advisory agreement. So sure, advisory agreement you can probably find something online for free.
Did you ever have to part ways with an advisor prior to?
Yes, actually the first advisor we got, like, so he was very good.
Same person.
Yeah, so he was very good, but like he had 2 kids in the second year, and we were not getting any value. So I just asked, like, we were not able to kind of talk as much. And in one of the discussions, I said, like, I have an advisor I want to fire. Like, how should I fire him? And he said, you should just wrap up the shares and fire him. And then I did that. So,
All right.
so yeah, then occasionally, like, you just because it's a monthly vesting,
Yeah.
it works. I'm sorry. Okay, and the other thing that I've seen people do is instead of a 2-year, 3-year deal, some people like go with a 3-month rolling advisory agreement where, like, if you don't talk for 3 months, it automatically kind of dies. Like you have to kind of renew it every 3 months. That has been kind of such a model where it's just easier to kind of stop the relationship if it doesn't work.
Interesting. And Nuno, how about your
So
experience?
I have a very specific opinion on this, and I've been on both sides, actually many times. I think 1 to 2 years, I think more than 3 years is very uncommon that it actually ends up working. I've seen cases where people structured around 3 or 4 years. After 2 years, people are checked out. So 1 to 2 years, and I think the difference is within 1 year if there's clear expertise domain needed, because the company will likely move fast or will die probably. So one of the 2 things will happen, and so I think the 1 year maybe fits that a little bit better, or the heavy Rolodex play, et cetera, and maybe the 2 years is really best fit by sort of the more coaching, mentorship type angle. I don't take cliffs. I don't believe in cliffs for advisors. I think some people like doing it. If you do a short cliff, okay, maybe you want to try it for 2 or 3 months. But I don't think it's fair to ask someone that in principle has very significant knowledge that they can bring to the table any time that you meet them. 1 hour of their time is actually worth a lot to you, and not give them any compensation whatsoever for them to be at the table. So I personally don't take cliffs. I recommend my entrepreneurs to be very, very, very, very specific around the advisors they bring on board and vet them as much as they can and be very clear around the alignment of interests, etc., but also to not do cliffs. At the end of the day, one thing I actually do like from the advisor at the end of the day is that the advisor at some point does interact with the board and does interact maybe with some parts of the team and doesn't just become sort of someone that is just linked to the CEO and that's it. But overall, we haven't had a lot of bad issues. What normally ends up happening with advisors is the half-life at some point, ends, right? So they're no longer very valuable to you. And if they become very valuable to you, it's very unlikely you're going to reload them as advisors. They're probably going to become something else to you, right? So they're going to become, either a board member or someone that's more connected to you that you pay almost as you pay a consultant or as a coach or as a mentor. And that's at least been my experiences with companies that we've worked with.
So in your experience, have you effectively rotated every 2 years, or have you had cases where the advisor was sort of
It's very uncommon that they go beyond 2 years, and it's very common that people sort of at the back end of their time, like the last 6 months or so, are not very useful. And to be very, very honest, in many cases, it's the fault of the company and the fault of the CEO, who also is not tapping into them anymore because they have a lot of other stuff to think about. So sometimes, actually, this is a two-way street. I've been, again, on both sides of the fence. And sometimes people don't reach out to me as an advisor. And at some point, I need to say, guys, am I still useful here? I'm investing. It's cool, but you haven't talked to me in 3 months, right? So this is not clearly very valuable to you. So at this point, one of the things that I would think about is this an advisory role that is what I call a light advisory role, where you talk to this person every 2 weeks, every month, for very specific things, and I get some time in their calendar? Or is this a person I'm tapping into systematically on a weekly basis, and therefore maybe the arrangement is a little bit different, maybe there's cash at the table? It's a very funny thing for startups, but like cash is a very difficult resource to get. So I always say it's a good two-way street thing. If the person's so valuable, you need to meet them a lot on a weekly basis. It might make sense to put some cash at the table so that both parts are incentivized to show up, right, and actually make it work. I've had advisory things that have been paid, which is very uncommon in Silicon Valley. And I can tell you the relationship I have with the entrepreneur, the time I spend with them, the quality of the time I spend with them is significantly better on both sides, right? We're more committed, we really want to do it. Again, it's horses for courses, so it depends on what you're looking for. You can get a lot of good advice, I agree with Aaron. It's not always best aligned, it's not always the best advice, but you can get a lot of free advice here in Silicon Valley for sure. So at least I would think about advisors in that standpoint, you know, in a little bit more of a holistic perspective and how they relate to the rest of the company, not just to the CEO.
Right. And you mentioned at least one case where you were the advisor and you were asked to join the board. Is there a clear path or expectation that eventually, if you do a good job being an advisor, that you may be asked to join the board?
No is the sort of short answer to it. And this was a very strange case where the person was really trying to get me to be an independent board member, was an investor on the board. And so at that point, the CEO was like, mate, this is not cool. And I remember having this is the strangest conversation I've had on any advisor discussion in my life with the CEO and COO of this company, where they had a call with me and they said, we're really pissed off. They're pushing to have you on the board. They actually have a tranche coming for some money that they want to put into the company. And they're making it subject to you joining the board. And you're like, are you independent or not? And I was like, literally on the phone, I was like, I am independent, I think. so it was one of these stupidest discussions. And I basically turned to them and said, do you think I'm independent? They think, yes. Do I bring value to you guys? Yes. Do you think I'll be bringing continued value also with the governance role? Yes. Do you need the money? Yes. So why are we having this call again? I mean, is it just, you know, just an ego principle thing? Okay, I understand this is not the normal way we would do this, but, and I've been on the board since. I actually have a board call tonight with them. So actually I've been on that board for 4 years. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all the insights and experiences. How about you, Fatih?
In our case, it's pretty much exactly as what Aaron said. I think those ranges are pretty standard. As you mentioned, the first few meetings are free, and I think someone who believes they can add value is kind of fine with something that has a linear vesting schedule, and is fine with also being able to just part ways mutually with either party deciding to end it if they don't feel they're adding value, or if the company feels the advisor isn't adding value. That's been the case for us in both cases.
Okay, excellent. Paul, I'm back to you.
So for, yes, exactly the same numbers as Aaron mentioned, 0.3 to 1% equity. For advisors, it really depends on where the entrepreneurs are. If you're really young, enthusiastic, and inexperienced entrepreneur, it's different to attract a really capable advisory board versus where you have a good track record, people know you, people understand your success, and then there's a different kind of conversation. So for us at Incorporate, we had the same advisors, I would say almost for 10 years. We had 2 advisors that stayed with us from beginning to end. And we were also we were not shy. And we were nagging the advisors, and when they couldn't find time, we would fly to their homes. We had from New York to the Hamptons and stay with them and get what we need to get, and we wouldn't let them go. So we were definitely extremely persistent. I think to avoid the disappointment, it's very important to structure it from the get-go. Really understand the boundaries of how that engagement looks like, what your expectations are and what you're willing to give, but what your expectations are also from them. It's almost like, guys, it's almost like signing a prenup, right? So you have to know how you're going to get out of it before you even get in it. And that's one of the, I think, advices that I would give to all the entrepreneurs. You would just know how to get out of it if it doesn't work for you with the least amount of damage. Yeah.
So you must have gone through a fairly long vetting process before you decided.
Not at the beginning of Anchor Free, but after we raised this big round of funding, yes,
Yeah.
we did. Yeah.
And
Before we were not very experienced. We really didn't know what we were doing. We were happy to take whoever wants to talk with us.
And what are some methods or approaches you take to motivate the right behavior, to promote engagement? Obviously, giving a percentage or a fraction of a percent of your company is one, to compensate them, align incentives with the company. What are some other qualitative measures do you utilize to align incentives or promote engagement, really make sure that they're interested and genuine in helping?
Yeah, maybe it's not going to sound right, but I try to set up weekly and monthly calls, make sure those happen, at least with me or with my co-founders. But more than that, I mean, these guys are really not in it, ladies or gentlemen, for the money. They're past that stage. So I think it is very important to be aligned in terms of mission, vision, and impact, and that it is measurable, and they see their value, and they see that they are listening, or the entrepreneurs are listening to that. So, like I said, both at Eddy right now, we positioned it when we were starting completely for profit, but one of our advisors from Turkey said, you know what, you guys are actually, you need to be more thinking of the more impact side. So we started, okay, what can we do? What do you mean by that? And we started positioning it more on the impact of education for different levels of income of potential students, and started changing our mindset of who we are talking to, and more talking to impact funds, not for raising money again, but just getting, do we have something to stand on? For Anchor Free, it was the same. We had a healthy variety of advisors from different, with different expertise, and they were all motivated differently, you know. But I think for us, the result, where the advisors see their impact and they see they are being listened to and executed, is very important, because we cannot know everything. We don't know everything. And we don't know what we don't know. I think that's very dangerous.
Yeah.
And we think we do, so, yeah.
Well, it sounds like you've done an excellent job if they stay around for 10 years and still contributed. So hats off to you.
I've done a lot of mistakes too, so.
How about you, Eren? How do you approach your advisors to keep them engaged?
I think it's a balance. Once you get the deal done, like the number becomes really unimportant. So it becomes also again almost a social incentive type of situation. It's all about, for me, it has been most about whether I have been able to keep them engaged or not. So we have several advisors we are not fired because their shares were too small to fire. But the ones that are like, and actually for me it's a little different, because there are maybe 4 or 5 people I get a lot of advice from, but they also, at this stage, if they want to spend their time, they also they are also like, they have enough money that they also want to invest, so they became investors practically. But like investment side, they're like very close advisors for me. I probably talk to me every month and a half or so. With one or two months, we have a routine monthly call. It used to be kind of every 2 weeks, now it's monthly. And the way each month I say, here's what I want to, I text him and say, here's what I want to chat about, maybe an hour before. He doesn't have to prepare anything, and we just do a call and discuss it one subject. With the others, it's very ad hoc, so like whenever there is something, couple interesting subjects to discuss, we just schedule a call with them. So yeah, I think depending on the person, if the person is a full-time entrepreneur, things like that, I think monthly or any kind of routine meetings don't work. So I have been advised with a couple companies, and whenever there's a recurring meeting, after a while I check out.
Yeah.
So like I need to know that there's something important enough to discuss.
It can't be just a routine meeting.
It can be, but like the person I do have a routine meeting is not doing anything like full time. So he advises a lot of companies. He's in a lot of boards and he's a VC. So it depends on the person. Like there are some professions who are full time advisors, like VCs, or like people who are disabled boards, they pretty much hold like main job is like advising other people. But if you're talking about a kind of busy entrepreneur executive, so it's usually kind of as needed. I think it's mostly about like whether you can have engaging kind of subjects to discuss. If it's just routine, here's our numbers, what do you think? Like, and if it's all about like, can you introduce me to this person, that person, it becomes boring for the other party.
Great. How about you, Nina?
So a couple of things. I actually designed and run the senior advisory program at Christian Robotics. So we actually have advisors as well in venture capital. And this is a bit of a different angle because they spend like a month with us part-time and they do a bunch of things with us. And so when I'm setting up the program and then they stay as senior advisors, they graduate and become senior advisors to us going forward. I have a lot of very thoughtful discussions around one, out of these different things, you know, time with partners, time with other startups and seeing them pitch. Ultimate objective of the program for you, you want to become an investor, you want to be a better angel investor, do you want to figure out your next startup, you know, what's the main objective? So I spent a lot of time around that. And this brings me back to the notion of motivation, right? I think it's not just alignment in incentives and alignment in what the objectives are of the advisory. It's really deep down, what does the person want to get out of it, right? And what's the ultimate play for both sides? And I think sometimes the discussion only happens one way, and it doesn't happen the other way, right? What does the advisor actually want out of this at the end of the day? So that's really number one, and I don't think there are what I'd call silver bullets to keep engagement going. But if you sort of align to that, if you align to that person, I think that will work out really well. The second thing is involve this person also in the life of the company. You know, some of the most fun advisory boards or senior advisory gigs that I've had in my career have been when they asked me to join the Christmas party or the holiday party, or they asked me to join, you know, some retreat that they have, or they asked me to. It's actually funny because one of the funnest retreats I've ever joined, I joined as a client, which was Verta Health. I was actually an investor, and then I was actually a user of their service, and I was a relatively successful user of their service. So they invited me as one of 3 patients to their retreat, and just spending time with their team and just being there, it's actually a lot of fun. And so really basic things sometimes, just involve them in the life of the company, give them a little bit of access beyond just, you know, the CEO or the C-suite. Some access to the board might be interesting as well. And the final thing is, we talk a lot about advisory boards, but sometimes advisory boards start as 1 advisor or 2 advisors, and it's not really the structure of a board. One of the people that I learned probably most from, and one of the first advisory boards that I took formally, he used to do these advisory boards every 6 months. So he would tap into each advisor on normally a monthly basis, and then he would organize every 6 months these meetings around the world. And we had one in Hawaii, and he always co-located them with the board. So these 6-month points, there would be a joint meeting between board and advisory board, and then there would be a board meeting by itself, or sometimes actually the board meeting would happen before, and then the advisory board after. So he kept switching it. And I remember these things. I remember the one in Hawaii, I remember the one in Hong Kong. And for an advisor, that's really, you know, very fulfilling. Because you're part of a network, you meet other people, you get to know how the company's doing, you feel you're really in it. And that's actually sometimes, even if you're sort of losing a little bit of momentum, you haven't talked in 2 months actually, you know, when you go to that, you regain momentum and you're part of the process again, and you're again feeling like you need to actually contribute. So there are a couple of hacks. I'm a hacker by background, so there are a couple of hacks that I think work really, really well. And some might work for you better personally and for your organization than others, but there's a bunch of stuff that will definitely re-engage and get people more to the table.
Excellent. And Fat, would you like to share some of your experiences?
Sure. Yeah, in our case, I find what's generally worked best is to kind of give an update of progress that's been made since the last call. We try and keep them relatively regular, once every 2 weeks. Fill them in on deals we're getting, and then also then talk about difficulties, so roadblocks we're facing, or things that aren't working out the way we want them to, and that basically gives them an opportunity to kind of rack their brain a bit, and see if there are ways in which they can help you surpass that roadblock, whether it's by giving advice or having been in a similar situation in their company, in their past lives, when they were an executive, if they're retired or whatever, or if they're still an executive. So it kind of, that's generally what's worked best for us.
Great. Well, this has been fascinating. In closing, any advice you'd like to offer to our audience?
Yeah, just to recap, I would say make sure your advisory board has a good diversity, technical people, maybe growth people, also marketing, different disciplines, so they can all bring a different aspect which you haven't thought about to your business. I think that's very important, diversity. Second thing is structuring. Structure it well and structure it beforehand. It's good for you and also for the advisors. It's also good for your reputation, because if you're a serial entrepreneur, you don't want to have a bad reputation in the industry. It's very important. And also choose the people. There is an abundance of good people in the valley and good advisors around the world. Just make sure that they are really aligned and understand or related. They can relate to you, but also understand really what motivates them. It's usually, I found out, money is not a motivation for those people. It's usually other things, either putting their name to a mission, putting their name to an exit, or just being involved in a network that they haven't been a part of before. So really, really ask the questions. Don't be shy to ask questions. I ask a lot of questions. Ask the questions, write it down, and then highlight the most frequent words that they say, and then see if they really meet where you are and what you want to achieve. Because they are telling you, you just need to really listen.
So there's maybe good and bad stories. I'd like to end with a bad story that maybe has a good ending. And I remember one company that I was on the advisory board of. There was a particular advisory board member, bright person, great Rolodex, helping a lot on strategy, helping bring in some of his clients, mostly for business development, so it wasn't really for fundraising, etc. And for some reason, the connection between him and the CEO started changing a little bit, and there was, in some way, the value wasn't fully there. They never really closed the deal because of this advisor, etc. The advisor was never terminated, but it sort of went from monthly calls to every 2 months, every 3 months, etc. And then at the end, the company actually ended up merging and doing well by itself, etc. Now the advisor is actually me. I was the advisor to this guy. He's one of my first advisors. You know the guy, Christoph. And we ended up actually co-founding a venture capital firm together. And he was my partner in my first fund. And so sometimes things like this actually happen, right? Sometimes, again, horses for courses, maybe we weren't the right match at that time as an advisory connection, but that's how we started engaging. Maybe we were a better match to do other things. And we've had the strangest relationship because we've done, a fund together. I've been an independent board member on one of his boards after that, and I've been an advisory board member to him. So I think we've done almost anything you can do around sort of the startup world together. And there's plenty of examples like that. I remember Kebab, with Kevin there, and one of his senior advisors, Kent, ended up being a CXO to the company after he was an advisor. So there's a lot of these connections that happen where maybe the initial connection is the way to spark things, but there's something much bigger beyond it that goes through it. So don't be too formulaic in how you look at this. You are going to make mistakes, and we're all people, and some are going to work great and some are not. Do protect yourself to make sure that you understand the structure of what you're doing, but at the end of the day, there's magic that sometimes happens.
When I look back at the kind of moments for me, like I still remember the discussion with the advisors I had. For example, the first time I had to fire somebody, I remember I was so stressed and kind of so down. So I kind of called one of my advisors and said, okay, how do I do this? Why do I feel like shit? This is a bad decision. So I think and there are all these different moments where you may be in the position where you've never done something, and there are a lot of people who have done it before. So yeah, I would say just go with focus on people who are in your shoes 1 or 2 years ago. If you find some if you try to get certain advisors who so detached from your day-to-day problems today, so it's not going to be nearly as useful. So for example, when people ask me about how did you raise money from Carbon Health, that's just irrelevant for most people, because the second time was very easy. It's not going to be the same for them. So I had to remember what happened 10 years ago, but 10 years ago was too it wasn't relevant, like the times have changed since then, right? So really just go for somebody who's been in your shoes like 2 years ago at most.
That's great advice.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd echo a lot of what everyone else has said. Know how you're going to end the relationship if it's not working out. In our case, the people have been through some of what we've done where they've helped build companies before, but in many cases, maybe it was many years ago and they've achieved a very high level of success. But I think one of the most important things is exactly what Balan said. I think you want advisors who have something more than the financial piece driving them, who want to do this because they believe in your mission and want to see you succeed because they want that mission to succeed. Typically will give you a little bit of their time free up front and even be helpful with valuable advice maybe before you strike that financial relationship.
Great. Thank you. That's great wisdom. So we'll open up for Q&A from the crowd. If you guys have any questions?
I have one
Yes.
question.
Go ahead.
Thank you all. I'll have introduced. My name is Emma.
Hi. I'm kind of loud. One question I have actually, do you ever meet with the board of advisors, all of them together? Like personally, I have 3 people on my boards and I always talk to them separately. Or sometimes even over voice notes on WhatsApp because we don't have time to meet, but that's sufficient. But do you ever have,
I would recommend that you do, if you have more than 2 people at least, that you bring them in together once in a while, I don't know, once a year or something like that. And I think it's part of the appeal, as I said before, for the advisor to be an advisor to the company, that he gets to also network and meet other people. And once people are together, there's a different dimension to the advice they can give and how they can actually input into the company. It needs to be a little bit managed, right? If you have an advisory board with 3 people, maybe a little bit less. If you have an advisory board with 7 people, you need to manage it quite a bit and prepare it quite a lot. And I do recommend that at some point there is interactions between the board and the advisory board.
Okay. Tutkun.
So you guys have been recommending a lot about alignment. I just want you to fill it in. So what does that mean? And then if you're already aligned with somebody, why do you want them in your board, right? Or advisory board, why do you? If you're already aligned, what are the examples of misalignments? And then you see that are must-have. And then in what sense does the alignment come into play?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. For example, we've been extremely bullish during our growth in Middle East. And when we were talking to different people, our advisors who believed in the mission said we should continue to be bullish in Middle East and go for land grab versus people who didn't understand what we were doing or who wouldn't endorse what we were doing, said, oh, it just doesn't make sense. It's okay if these people don't watch YouTube or doesn't get access to New York Times. Why do you care? So here's the thing. When you're growing a company, 2 plus 2 doesn't make 4. 2 plus 2 makes 10 when you're growing a company. That's why you need the right people to boost you up. So you don't get to the 4, you get to the 10. Otherwise, the last thing you want as an entrepreneur, especially you will go through so much, is doubting yourself. The moment you doubt yourself, you lose the game. That's why you need people who will not doubt you, on the contrary, who will believe in you, who will push you, and who will also direct you, because you can become so unfocused at times, who will just kind of get you to focus on the right direction. That's why it's very important. I think relating and alignment is very important.
The alignment I mentioned, obviously this is more a mission, vision alignment, is also around activities, even when you're defining the advisory agreement and what you're going to do with a person as well. And what I've seen this over and over again, that there's assumptions like, I'm going to bring this person because, and actually the classic one, 90% of the time, I wouldn't say it's all the time, but 90% of the time is you want someone for their Rolodex, for the intros, because you want to either do business development or sell to that company or fundraise, right? And you bring, for example, in my case, I'm a VC, so people will bring me on board because you're going to help me fundraise. And it's like, you should have a conversation with me, because the thing I want to help you the least on is fundraising as an advisor, right? For the reasons I said before. So, you know, that type of thing happens all the time. I had one situation recently where they're like, yeah, we're thinking of Rolodex for this specific advisor, etc. And I was like, I've worked with that person. They have an amazing Rolodex, but they would not write an email if they were about to die, right? They will not do it, right? So the Rolodex is great, but they won't tap their Rolodex to do anything, right? Amazing Rolodex, they will not tap it. And so that's the type of alignment that I mean, which is more sort of the granular activities piece. This is obviously more the mission, vision, alignment on who do we want to become and how do we grow.
So, from your experience and from what I've seen as well, this whole finding an advisor is always one way of the founder going after someone. Have you ever seen the reverse of it, of finding niche companies and more like the advisor going after a startup?
I only see it for people who are trying to become advisors.
Yeah.
Those are usually the least helpful advisors. So they want to just like advise a couple companies so they can write on resume that they advise companies. But like the other way, the more kind of realistic way it works is like you start getting help from somebody, that person gets really engaged, and eventually they just want to be like, they want to also just build some sort of organic relationship. And they say like, yeah, so you kind of enjoy working with this team, and then you just kind of suggest being an advisor. But like, I don't think anybody you would want to advise from is like going after just like looking for companies' advice.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about diversity? Like when I'm looking for advisors, like usually, you know, it's like we know that in the Silicon Valley, like when you look at the crowd, there are certain type, but maybe there are others too. Is it becoming more important to look for advisors representing different, you know, male, female, or racial and all that? What does it play a role?
Could you repeat the question, please?
For the camera. Well, I was asking about the diversity. While you are looking for an advisor, should you pay attention to that? Is it important or not?
I mean, for me, I'll start, but I tend to allocate my advisory more towards women these days. That's intentional. So just because you inherently have I inherently have more male friends. I inherently become advisors to all my friends' startups. So like my 90% of my calendar is like advising bandit was already preoccupied with my friends who are mostly engineers or mostly men, right? So then I get like the remaining time I have, I almost exclusively kind of work with women. But I think this is one of the important things. It's just like you want like unfortunately still kind of the primary networks of people are the biggest leverages they have. And the primary networks are not very like inclusive. I actually just checked this. There was this tool I couldn't find the tool again, but it checks your Twitter followers and who you follow and like look at the gender balance there. So I was assuming it would be more balanced when I tested. I was following 85% men, 15% women on there. So then I kind of realized, okay, look, then your kind of opinion gets influenced by that, by the same thing. So since then that I have been kind of changing the ratio. Now I'm at like 60-40. So it's like you have to intentionally do something. If you don't do anything intentional, I think you just tend to get less inclusive.
I don't think we're very good at it yet. I mean, and I'm being nice. I think we're really poor at this. And I speak for myself, so this is a mea culpa. I'm not saying, oh, I'm great and everyone else is awful. I don't think we think enough about it. And it's actually even worse than that because I work a lot in the consumer space, so it should be actually racial diversity, ethnic diversity. I've worked in 35 countries, so it should be easier to do this. And so one thing I started doing maybe 2 years back or something like that is positive discrimination. For a long time, I didn't believe in it, and there's no other way. Honestly, there's no other way. And if I'm looking at an entrepreneur or someone, for example, just talking more about the investment side, that's a woman versus a man, and if it's sort of borderline, I might not take the meeting or call with a man for a first meeting, but I would take it with a woman. And For a long time, I have to be very honest here again, mea culpa, I didn't believe in positive discrimination. And I was raised by very strong women, and they never told me about women's role. My mother's an MD. My grandmother only had one eye, and she worked for the Portuguese Central Bank for 35 years. So for me, the role of women in society was never at cause. And so I thought, no, surely I don't need to talk about that or do anything about it. And I think, last few years I've done it more. I'm still not very good at it, and would appreciate any advice, actually.
All right. Well, why don't we first give a round of applause for and before we close, I also want to invite Aisha Idris for her message.
Thank you. Thanks, folks, very much. This was fabulous. And thanks for attending. So, it's close to the end of the year, so I'll veer off a little bit besides TÜSİAD, where this is a group where we get together with business folks. There's two other organizations I want to talk about because this is primarily Turkish folks here in the room. And they're really important because it's the end of the year and it's the season of giving back. One of them is American Turkish Society. They're based out of New York. They largely focus on cultural events. Example, New York Film Festival, Turkish Film Festival that they're going to hold very soon. The other organization is called Turkish Philanthropic Funds. And what they do is they link the Turkish folks in United States with the NGOs, reputable NGOs back in Turkey for the folks who want to give back either their funds or their time. So if you're interested in any of these, please do come up and chat with me besides, of course, being an active member of TÜSİAD. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Aisha. Thanks again, everyone, for coming this evening. And if you're interested in helping us out in curating more events for next year that involve startup founders or workers, please come see me. Thank you.